from you today.
Thank you, Shailesh, for those kind words. I don't know to what extent I will be able to do justice to this conversation, but I will try to. So yes, thank you very much for giving this background. I would like to talk a little bit in terms of our fund. Um, so as Shailesh said that we are a private equity fund. We are backed by two large sponsors. One is State Bank of India and the Sovereign Wealth Fund of Oman. It's a G2G partnership where the two governments through these institutions supported and created this platform. And we have been part of this platform since its early days. So I joined them 12 years back. We started 13 years back. And as Shailesh said, I was working with ICICI Group before that in different roles, of course, private equity as well as investment banking before that. So overall, some 20 odd years of doing something similar. But yeah, I've worked across sectors. But consumer risk, of course, has been one theme which has been a little bit more closer to reality in terms of my transactions and my exits and stuff. So we'll focus more on consumer, and then we'll talk about how a private equity fund looks at consumer businesses. I'm not too great in terms of doing a lecture, so I will try to kind of have a short monologue, and then basically it will be better if we make this interactive. And of course, Shailesh did try to kind of define what is expected out of this, and I'll try to do some justice. So Shailesh, if I understand correctly, what's the profile of the audience in terms of they're largely part of your institute, your students, as well as your alumni, right?
Yes, sir. So I do see a few alumni who are attending this session, trying to benefit from your learnings, of course. And majority of the crowd are currently pursuing FinBridge and FinPlus candidates. So they have a basic understanding about capital markets, and some of them have actually applied on real life Indian companies, their learnings which they have gone through. The alumni is obviously working in the investment research world out there. So along with their practice of investment ideologies at their respective firms, they do attend these sessions to keep on updating themselves with, how different fund managers or investment managers take a look at different spaces and take key learnings from these opportunities.
Okay, perfect. So I'll try to kind of make it as simple as possible. And please shout out in case if you feel I need to repeat something. So, consumer business in India is very diverse. And the way I look at it, I actually do not look at it as sector. It is actually a theme, which is largely driven by the demographic profile of how our country is structured today. And the benefits of that particular consumption story is what most of the businesses are trying to kind of sweat and use to their advantage. However, as you learn more about our industry, consumer will remain to be a sector. And there are different ways in which a consumer segment or consumer theme is cut. I'll try to kind of talk about some of those things, and then we'll try to also define generally how a private equity fund looks at when they're looking at a consumer business. So any consumer business, there are different ways in which people cut. There's one way to cut it is that there are consumer staples, and then there are consumer discretionary products. So basically, a consumer business is defined as any business which is either supplying products or providing services to the last mile guy, to the individual customer. If you're supplying to an organization, I personally would not qualify that as a consumer business. It's a B2B business. And while the application industry could still be qualified as a consumer sector. So coming back, of course, there are staples, which are your regular salt, sugar, chocolates and stuff. And in discretionary products, you have cars, you have watches, you have electronic equipments, which are discretionary in nature. It's also cut as durable and non-durable. So your non-durables are your fast-moving goods, which are largely your FMCG products, which have, fast. Why it's called fast-moving? Because the consumer purchase cycle is more frequent. So once in a month or twice in a month, you would end up buying that particular product. Consumer durable, the duration is much larger. So a refrigerator or a washing machine or an air conditioner or a furniture is something which would qualify as a consumer durable. Where the duration of frequency of purchase could be over a period of 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, could be anything. Of course, there are different ways in which we look at businesses, and there are attractiveness index attached to each one of these businesses. So the way sectoral differences are looked at. I mean, if I talked about furniture is a consumer durable, furniture is a sector in its own in India. Similarly, electronic appliances is a sector in its own in India, but they are all come under consumer durable ambit because there are business model, the way you actually approach the business, the way you sell to the customer, is quite similar, and that is why these cuts are important. However, they are not so important that you have to make a super specialization if you're working in a private equity fund or a VC fund. The secondary market size, there are equity research analysts who specialize on a certain sub-segment. So there are consumer durable analysts and there are FMCG specific analysts. Sometimes they're different. Sometimes they're common depending upon what kind of skill sets they have acquired over a period of time. Private equity fund analysts are generalists largely. In a fund like ours, which is a sector agnostic fund, we look at all kinds of businesses, and we try to kind of keep our lens in a way such that we are able to appreciate the business model rather than focus too much on these cuts that I just talked about. So, of course, it's important to kind of look at sector-specific pointers. But when we evaluate a consumer business, we look at everything that we want it to be. We want the industry to be attractive. We want the business model to be attractive. We want the product to be differentiated. Of course, there is financial analysis which is done. We want ratios to be in a particular range, and of course there is valuation that we want to pay for a particular business depending upon how attractive we find the business model. Of course, this is part of the evaluation, but when we look at investing in a business, we look at other things as well. How we believe that the businesses would pan out over the next 5 to 7 years. How we can structure the transaction in a way that our entry valuation gets protected, our exit gets protected. We spend a lot of time in trying to understand how we can exit from that particular company. This is general. It's not sector specific, but it is important to talk about it in this parlance because how do you, when we look at business attractiveness in a consumer segment, there is one thing which which comes out more strikingly is the brand. We want product differentiation. Sometimes, product differentiation is not there. So a lot of FMCG businesses, there won't be product differentiation, but a differentiation there is in the form of a brand. So we can talk more about branding, advertisement, and other things. So we look for such unique selling propositions in a business, and largely in funds like us who are minority investors, we look at businesses which are still in their in the scale is not comparable to the large HULs and NSLAs of the world. So those businesses are still emerging and they have high growth aspects, but we evaluate them from the perspective of their ability to grow, their ability to have a sustainable competitive advantage. So we can talk about the private equity piece on the consumer basis on the questions that you will raise. There's one thing more, which is the most important aspect of the competitive advantage is the channel with which the channel in which you're selling your product or service. So as I said, I define consumer business if you are selling to a individual customer. And how do you reach that particular individual customer is your channel. And traditionally, there have been two ways, of course, your own exclusive brand outlet. So if you're a product company or a service company, you create your own exclusive brand outlet, your EBOs. You would have seen the Nikes of the world and Arabs of the world, they're coming up with their own outlets and reaching the customer directly. When you are creating that, you are creating a competitive advantage because if you have a network of stores where you are exclusively selling your products, then that's an advantage which your competitor cannot take away from you. If you're ahead of the competitor, then you are ahead of the competitor. Something similar in physical retail is the trade channel, which is the distributor, stockist, retailer network. Lot of businesses, which consumer businesses traditionally in India, products have been sold through this particular channel. So what most of the large businesses do is that they across the country, they appoint distributors. Sometimes those distributors are at state level or sometimes at a region level. And they create a chain of distributors, and under distributors, there are stockists. And the stockists or dealers are in touch with retailers in that particular region. So sometimes, most of the times, the endeavor of the company is to have a particular distribution network where the entire see-through is to the retailer. So you should know which retailer, which provisional store or which Kirana store is buying your product and selling your product, such that what is the kind of data, what is the kind of data around the sale you're able to track at the shop level. When you're entering a new market, sometimes there are companies do an outright sale to a large dealer, and then the dealer kind of decides how he wants to sell in that particular territory. That also happens, but that's not an ideal scenario. It's a scenario which most of the businesses do when they are new in that particular region. And over a period of time, the endeavor is to kind of create their own distribution network and hop onto it. When you create your own distribution network, again, there's a competitive advantage that you are creating because to have a distribution network, it takes years to establish that. It takes years to have a well-oiled distribution network where how the network is able to cater to the demand and the ground level, also recover your cash. Because at the end of the day, retailer and the dealers, they need some sort of credit period, and that credit period is managed by the channel. So these are the two more traditional channels. Of course, the new channels are online. Online in the consumer segment, of course, you can sell through your own website, or you can sell through a third party seller like Amazon or Flipkart or Myntra, where you get where your ability to reach out to a larger customer base is there. However, you pay a particular share of the revenue to these platforms. Ideally, if you don't want to share the revenue to these platforms, you need to create traffic on your own website, or you need to sell through your own EBO. But it's always more difficult to do that because it is not easy to create a traffic on your website. So in all of these channels, what you continue to do and always do is that you need to keep your focus on advertisement, promotions, schemes. Every channel has its nuances in terms of what kind of schemes that it comes up with. And these are the learnings which needs to be taken care of over a period of time. So after many years of doing this, can a company is able to champion it and then replicate it to other part of the country. So I'll stop here. It's kind of a very boring monologue on how I feel that the consumer businesses gets looked at. Um, it will be interesting to kind of understand what the audience is thinking and what they want to understand in the sector, or private equity as an industry, how we look at the consumer segment, some of our experiences, very open to all kinds of questions. Ganesh.
While people actually submit their questions to me on chat, I would like to ask a few questions of my own, if it is okay, sir.
Sure.
It's while you were walking us briefly through the structures, you mentioned a statement that you structure your transactions in such a manner that you protect your entry and exit valuations.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate that a bit more into specific details, how you actually do it? Because this is something which we have always read of theoretically, but given the fact this is a proper PE session for all of us, I would genuinely want to learn a lot in this domain from you, considering the fact you've spent a significant amount of time with a sovereign PE fund, and how you guys go about doing this with Indian partners, or let's say Indian opportunities where you have invested yourself. Without naming the investments, but we would genuinely want to understand what kind of structures are you talking about, and some bit more detail around that would be genuinely very much learning for us.
Yeah. So see, we'll talk about some of those structures. But valuation structuring or exit structuring is very dynamic, and it's not applicable on all transactions. So sometimes you have the need to structure the transaction because of the way the diligence outcome has been there, or the valuation, if there is a mismatch in terms of what is the ask, or what is the what we feel is the valuation. Or sometimes there is a huge mismatch in terms of how the entrepreneur feels their businesses will grow and how we feel that the business will grow. We need to kind of structure it. So the basic premise of, I'll be a little bit more theoretical, but basic premise of why structuring is done is because there is a gap in terms of our ability to understand and convince ourselves of how things will pan out compared to an entrepreneur or founder, right? And frankly, operationally, the founder will always know more than us, right? About his own business. But we have an advantage in terms of looking at multiple businesses over decades and understanding the risk of what can pan out and what cannot pan out. Not that we are 100% right, but there are some of very obvious risks. So in order to mitigate those risks, restructuring happens. So I'll give you some examples, right, for both entry as well as exits. And why I'm saying that we give a lot of thought at the time of entry to protect our valuation interests, protect our rights, and also our exit mechanism. And all of it is mostly documented in a definitive agreement, which is generally signed by the company. So we understand that being an equity investor, we need to take an equity risk. So the classic way of doing private equity, and actually most of our funds investments, that's how we do, is we take a direct stake by investing in the business and acquiring shares or subscribing to new shares in the company. It's a very, very general way of doing. If you are fairly convinced in terms of how we believe that what we are paying in terms of valuation is something that we are okay with, and there is generally no discomfort in terms of, or mismatch in terms of the valuation expectation of the company or the valuation that we are offering, then there's no harm in doing a direct equity structure. whenever there is a risk in terms of valuation or business risk, we have to protect ourselves. And there's no defined rule. It does depend upon how things have panned out. So sometimes there is these are projections. Some financial projections are such that um, we are not able to build our conviction. So in that case, uh, the valuation, a higher valuation is agreed upon, subject to the company performing as per the business plan. So it's not a 0-1. It's usually, if you, as you perform, so does the valuation. So if the company is actually able to perform to a level which they are projecting, then they take the higher valuation, and we are happy to do that, because ultimately, we would be proven wrong in terms of our assessment of the financial projections, but we're happy to be proven wrong in that case and pay higher valuation, because the ultimate goal is for a company to grow using our money, and not uh, only to ensure that the valuation is low. Valuation is low or high depends on whether business grows or not. If business grows and grows well, then the structuring helps to mitigate that particular mismatch. This is one way. Sometimes diligences throw certain um, inconsistencies. I would not say these are governance issues. These are sometimes inconsistencies which are generally there in small and medium businesses, because the way they are run, there's management is sometimes very eager to change some of these things and ready to fully cooperate. In that case, sometimes valuation is fixed, but it is convertible basis on how those inconsistencies um, are kind of corrected over a period of time. So that is one another level of structuring that we are able to do at entry level. Mm, there's structuring also in terms of um, uh, you know the reverse works. This is, for example, if company is able to overperform, the promoters also sometimes negotiate with us that if we overperform, then can they reset a valuation at a later date um, by our entry valuation gets, actually we enter at a lower valuation, and if they perform better than what they are promising, then in our valuation, actually entry valuation goes high. So that is done by giving warrants to promoters, and promoters are able to convert those warrants at a later date, thereby reducing our stake, and our entry valuation then would be reset to a higher number. So all kinds of structuring is done. Largely, if you go theoretically, it's whenever there is a mental mismatch in terms of valuation, we do this structuring. Um, Sometimes an event is also um, there. So if there is an acquisition which is planned, uh, so we we really don't know whether the acquisition will happen, not happen. We try to then ensure that our valuation, if we are not able to kind of change valuation, then at least we are able to protect our IRR by making sure that we are investing in tranches. So, for example, an acquisition is identified, and there will be diligence, and the acquisition may happen after 1 year. So, we'll fund part of the money today and balance money at the time of acquisition. So, our IRR for the balance money is not, the clock doesn't start ticking. So that is how we are sometimes able to structure and protect. This is all part of entry. Um, there would be many examples, but these were few. On the exit side, um, you know, we do less of structuring and more of uh, ensuring that what is our exitability. So we invest in businesses which are unlisted, with a view that they will get listed over the next 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years. So generally a 10-year fund. So anywhere between 2, 3 years to 5, 7 years that they can take to get listed, because we need to get an exit. And the most ideal way, if the company becomes a public limited business and get listed on the stock exchanges, then we can exit at any given point, any given point of time later. So in our fund, 5 of our portfolio companies got listed over the last 3 years. And some of them we have fully exited, and some of them we have partly exited and still holding because the businesses still have a lot of growth left. There's exit waterfall is something that we put it on the agreement. We like to put it on the agreement. It's a negotiated play where we ask for a commitment from the company and the founders that they will try to give exit to us over a period of time. And that exit, the way the exit would happen is something that there is an agreement. So for example, that there would be a timeline that in case if you achieve a certain revenue over the next 4 years, then within a particular time frame, the company should try to do an IPO. If you're not able to do an IPO, then try to find a third-party buyer for us. If you're not able to find a third-party buyer for us, then find a strategic buyer for us. In some cases, promoters also agree to buy our stake, but that's not something that we usually do. We've largely put up mechanisms which are agreed upon, which are where valuations are market driven, and whatever is the fair market value at that point of time, basis on that fair market value, we would exit. So on the exit side, mostly we do where we fix the exit mechanism and the exit waterfall and timelines around it. Because if you want to do an IPO, you have to really start preparing 2 years in advance. And if you want to do an IPO in 2026, then in 2024, you should start looking at whether you are a public limited company where your authorized share capital is in play, whether your secretarial standards are such that if you become listed, you'd be able to continue with those standards. If your auditors are looking at accounting in an old way or from the Ind AS way. So there are many things as you start looking at it. Then you have to appoint book running lead managers who start looking at and diligencing you and then prepare a DRHP. It takes sometimes 6 to 9 months to do that. And then once the DRHP is made, you apply to SEBI, and then SEBI takes few months to give an approval, sometimes 2 to 3 months. And then you have a 1 year window to list. So you're from the time that you start working on the IPO and by the time you get listed, that period could be 1 to 2 years. So it is important to define timelines such that everyone is on the same page that at what point of time you have to start working towards it. So that's more on structuring. So there are many private equity funds. We don't do that much, but many private equity funds also have exit deadlines, exit related valuation benchmarks, which are set. So that's not something that I would talk more about it. But yeah, exit related structuring is also done in the market, where sometimes it comes from the entrepreneur that if let's assume a fund is making a very handsome IRR, then a little bit of profit is shared with the promoter and the upside is shared with the promoter. All kind of structures are possible. So these are some of the structures that I think it was good to talk about.
Thank you so much, sir, for such a detailed answer. Actually, that answered quite a lot of follow-up questions as well, which I had in my head. Meanwhile, let me pass on the baton to a few other people. Actually, quite a lot have got on chat. So let me try and segregate a few questions which have been asked. In terms of, so Rahil has a question. He's our current batch student. How is the approach defined for a PE fund? Are macro concepts given a little more edge as compared to micro aspects? Or how does it work? How do you weigh across that? Because I'm sure Oman runs a joint fund with you guys, as in, you mentioned that Oman has a joint fund with State Bank, right? And you guys are investing in India. So simultaneously, as a bigger portfolio, they would have similar ventures with few other,
Countries.
Countries, right? So in terms of, have you had that visibility or decision making at a macro level, or how does that work? Like the fund allocation, you said $330 million for, let's say, an India portfolio. So how does that work at a sovereign fund level?
So no, I'll talk about India. So what the Oman Sovereign Wealth Fund of Oman does, I would not comment on that. But in terms of general comment, any sovereign wealth fund would look at the macros, and macros will definitely define how much they want to kind of allocate um, towards a country, towards a strategy, and the risk associated with it. And it is not limited to sovereign, but all global investors. So any region, so in India is an emerging region, it's an emerging country. While the expectation of growth is high over here, which means that the ability of the Indian markets or Indian securities delivering a higher IRR is there. But Indian valuation multiples are also high, so there is an inherent risk. Most of the global funds actually benchmark themselves to global US returns or Europe returns, but the allocation to an emerging market will always be limited, because they have to balance between growth and risk, right? So you will always see a lot of money getting diverted towards developed markets. In certain years, developed markets also give fairly good returns. And most of countries like India, they're still emerging, right? So we're still evolving in terms of our private equity venture capital culture, while other countries are fairly developed. Now, having said that, what has changed in the last 3-4 years is that our capital markets have been very rewarding, which means that 15 years, 20 years back, when any fund was looking at a transaction in India, the biggest challenge was how will you exit? Because the secondary markets or stock exchanges were not too deep. The Indian investors were not, the depth of the Indian market was actually not there. Largely, the secondary market was supported by the FIAs. Today, the IPO markets are fairly rewarding. Now, we are now hearing that a lot of businesses, large businesses which had the ability to kind of go and list to a US stock exchange or a Singapore stock exchange, have now started looking at India. These were Indian securities, but earlier there was a time when some of them reached out and got listed in Singapore or US, because that market was able to were able to kind of supply the kind of funds. But today the valuation in Indian markets are very good, and the domestic institution investors as well as the retail investors are providing the kind of support and breadth which the market is supporting, and that's why the exits have become better. So coming back to your point, at a global investor level, macros are definitely important, but at a fund level, like private equity fund, it's a combination of everything. We get into, so the economy has to be stable, the industry has to be attractive, the business has to be attractive, the product have to be differentiated, there has to be brand. We look at everything. Not that we will get everything in all of these investments, but we try to ensure that a balance of most of these aspects are reached. So as a private equity fund, we look at a lot of micro and company specific things. So for example, we have invested in a business where the industry was organized, part of the industry was non-existent. So whole idea was whether the industry will get from unorganized to organized. And one or two players who are trying to kind of make a story in that particular platform, it's a very difficult industry to back. Because what if somebody else has not been able to deliver, whether this company will be able to deliver and crack the code. But that is where you come in and you try to help the company create a play. So this is where macros may not support, but some of those entrepreneurs are very smart on how to do business differently and capture the market. And if they are able to execute in the right way and we are able to help them, we make money in the process.
Makes sense. Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. So the next question is from one of our alumni, Dhruv Rathod. Dhruv, you there?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So if you're okay with that, I will go ahead. Yeah, sure. So, hello, sir. Hello, Vishal, sir. I'm Dhruv Rathod. I worked with Inflection Point Ventures as a research analyst. So, sir, actually, I had one question on innovation. So, how has innovation influenced the FMCG, durables, as well as staples or other spaces in the consumer market, right? What impact does the kind of innovation have on valuation multiples as well as overall business attractiveness? As you were speaking about business attractiveness index, right? So it would be really helpful if you could also share some examples from your experience as well in this case.
Well, see, innovation is very important. So while uh, if innovation is with respect of products, um, largely it will be backed by VC funds. Um, we, in our experience, we actually do not invest in early stage businesses. So I would not be able to give you many examples of how we have been able to back new innovative products and um, take it through longer journey. We invest in businesses which have seen a couple of cycles, reached a 250 crore stage. They're profitable and they're looking for a higher growth from here on, trying to kind of maybe they're a regional player, they want to be national, they're strong in one particular channel and they want to increase their channel and they need working capital or kind of want to expand to their factory and they're looking at corporatizing their business in a way that they are more accepted by public market. So that's where we come into play. But in general, I do believe that innovation plays a very important role, and innovation has nothing to do with only product innovation, because in consumer businesses, a totally innovative product is very rare, right? It's how you um, reach out to a customer, and that is where we have seen some very smart innovation. And of course, largely most of them have been globally tested and then adopted in India. So we have seen how what Amazon did in terms of globally in terms of creating an entire network is an innovation, I would say. Um, what's happening in India with respect to most of the aggregators, be it Ola, Uber, Zomato, Swiggy, these are the new ways to reach out to customer. They are fairly tested globally, but happening in India on the consumer side. These are very interesting developments. How technology is playing a role increasingly, even in brick and mortar businesses, even in pure physical businesses, is something where promoters have really used very differentiated ways to run their business. Um, so, for example, one of my portfolio companies is into luxury furniture. So it's a only luxury furniture brand, largest and only luxury furniture brand in the country. I would, under no circumstances, there's any innovation, but they are the only ones who are doing it in India. What they're offering in India, nobody else is offering. Even global players are not able to offer, because you need to build capabilities in India. You need to build design capabilities. You need to build manufacturing capabilities. Of course, global companies have the brand, which is much larger in terms of their recall. But to create an entire supply chain, to create an entire business model in India, it takes time. And that is where, that business is able to kind of beat even the larger peers in India. So there's a company called Stanley. It's a luxury furniture and high premium furniture brand in the country. They have 60 plus stores. The second largest luxury furniture retailer in India is Natuzzi, and they have 15 stores. And Natuzzi is a global brand, much larger globally. But their ability to kind of penetrate the Indian market is they have not been able to do that, because when a customer walks in, you have a set of inventory that you showcase. But if there's any customization that the customer is looking for, the customer has to wait for 4 5 months, because the factory is somewhere in Europe. And to ensure that even the even the color of the fabric or color of the leather is, they want it to be different, they have to wait for 4-5 months. But Stanley is able to deliver in 4-5 weeks because they have their own manufacturing facilities and they can customize at N level. So these are, so I would not say that innovation is only about something coming with something new in terms of product or technology. I think there is a lot of merit in appreciating that the entrepreneur or funds or shareholders understand what is a need gap in the market and fill it.
Yeah, got your point, sir. Thank you so much for answering my question.
Thank you, sir. Sir, from a operational standpoint, uh, just out of curiosity, the joint structure which Oman Sovereign Fund has with SBI, is it because of the legal requirement as for a sovereign fund to invest in India, or is it something that the portfolio companies demand that, rather than having one powerful partner, have multiple partners on board?
No, none of it. There's no restriction for anyone. There are many sovereign funds who actually invest directly. So our platform is a G2G platform. So basically, then Prime Minister in 2008, Dr. Manmohan Singh, during one of his visits to Oman, there was a pact signed that Oman was anyways looking to partner someone in India, and they came up with a pact which that they will create a platform together to invest in India. So both partners came together to invest in Indian market. See, some of the global funds sometimes look for a local partner, right? And that is where it's more to do with maybe the sovereign wealth fund of Oman rather than in general being a requirement. Lot of funds, so a lot of global players sometimes, they come up and set up a small team and gain experience over a period of time. Then they expand the team. They work with their Singapore office and a small India office, and then largely they get settled, and then they start creating a larger India office over a period of time. That's very common, right? Or a structure like this where you have a local partner and you have a global fund, and together you're working together to create a platform. So they've all come from laterally from different private equity funds. It's more in terms of how you're looking at operationally handling it locally. There's no restriction or anything. It's more of a business commercial decision.
Got it, sir. Any other G2G sovereign wealth funds in India which are very prominent?
Not to my knowledge.
Got it, sir. Sir, I remember, I think around 5 or 6 years back, the PE space, because of certain structures like a compulsory buyback or a CCP, has got a really bad name in the startup world, right? I think the CCD era and, around that point in time. So you mentioned that you guys are not too much keen on the buyback side while you were talking about the exit structures. So if not the IPO, then what exactly is the exit strategy if at all that doesn't happen?
No, I mean, see, theoretically, I can go and sell my stake to anyone.
Yeah.
But will I be able to sell my stake to any other fund? Because any new fund. So, for example, if I have to invest 200 crores in a fund in a company, and the company does well, my value increases to 500 crores, and I need to find a buyer who has the ability to write a check of 500 crores. If somebody wants to invest 500 crores in a company, then he wants to do a diligence on the company. He wants the promoter to pitch to him. He wants the promoter to sign a shareholders agreement. He wants the promoter to kind of define how the next 5-10 years will pay out. What is his vision for the business? What is the next level of growth for the business? Who will tell all the stories, right? So the company and the founder plays a very important role in doing this transaction. So it is not that, it's a force on the company. It's more, you need a commitment from the company to help you run the process, because a diligence will be required, a promoter interaction will be required. All of these things will be required when I'm trying to sell it to third party. So to answer the question, if a company wants to do an IPO, more than I want to do an IPO, the promoter should be willing to do an IPO.
Hmm.
If the promoter doesn't want to do an IPO, then I cannot force him to do an IPO. So if an IPO doesn't happen because of market conditions, then we generally have a clause which says that, hey, please run a process, find a private equity fund who will buy our stake, and you help us in the process. So it's, there's no obligation on the promoter to give us a particular exit. The exit is on a fair market value terms, but he needs to help us run the process. He needs to be one who has to pitch. He needs to build a business plan for the next 5-7 years and then his story. Generally, it works because it's a combination. At that point of time, it will be a combination of we getting our exit and getting more money in the
fund. Yeah.
Right. So it works for both parties. If we are not able to find a buyer, sometimes people, promoters, also a lot of founders, they are okay to sell their business and also cash out. Right. So if promoters are willing to cash out, then in case we also put that if this doesn't happen, then we can together find a strategic buyer and sell the entire business, and both us as well as promoter will exit. That also sometimes happens. When none of it works, then the risk is ours. I mean, the risk is ours. So there are, so in certain cases, let's assume the promoter in the company is fairly cash accretive and cash generating. And let's assume there is a private equity fund who is ready to buy our stake. Promoters saying, I don't want to engage with another private equity fund. I want to increase my shareholding. Right? Then promoter and the company can together buy us out through a buyback procedure. And buyback had certain rules under the Companies Act. If those rules are met, then a buyback happens. But no investor usually gets a full buyback and full exit, because there are thresholds which are, you only get part. And then, so once we have done buyback because promoters were looking to increase their stake. So we were able to do buyback over a period of time, because there are rules under which you have to do it. Sometimes, so there are structures in the market which are where at some point of time there were NBFCs who were backing promoters to buy investor stake. So if promoters want to increase their stake, let's assume they've got private equity fund, but over a period of time they realize, no, I want to ensure that I become 100% again. So what do? Then the promoter at his own level was able to raise some debt, put some equity from his own side, use the two to buy the investor out and increase his stake in the company. And then through increased stake in the company and the cash flow in the company, the debt gets repaid over a period of time. Some NBFCs used to do that structure. So it's not that, in terms of what we are looking at, everything that we want to do is generally agreed upon with the promoter, the founder, and it is written down such that the rules of engagement are set for the next 5-7 years. Because every year, if you try to kind of reset your rules of engagement, then there is no path to follow. So there's a path which gets predefined and you work towards the path. The core and the first and the most important thing, the business has to grow. If business grow, usually exit happens.
Got it, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Sir, typically, like, what is the life cycle of the fund? I know you guys are not really just you are the sponsors and you yourself are the owners of the fund. So, but still, I just wanted to understand, is there a life cycle to the fund which you guys typically manage?
Yeah, we usually do 10 years as a term of the fund. And the whole idea of doing 10 years is we usually have 4 years of the first 4 years or 5 years of where we are investing, and the balance 5 to 6 years where we are exiting. There will always be an interim period where you're doing monitoring and trying to work with the company. So investments happen over a staggered 4-year term, and exits also happen in a staggered term. In each of the portfolio companies, sometimes you have to spend between 5 to 7 years to help the company become more attractive for the next level of growth or more prepared for next level of growth. In every company's business, you need to kind of make a lot of changes as you grow, and we help them. We help them solve some of these things.
Got it, sir. So there is one very important question which I felt out of all the questions I've got from the students. It's actually from a student named Vishal Verma. So quite a duo here. So, anyways, I'll give him an opportunity to ask you directly first hand.
Yes.
Vishal.
Nice to meet you, Vishal Verma.
Yeah, same here, sir. Good evening. So I want to know about what are the factors that led to the private equity landscape change in India. I mean, you are working in private equity space from a quite very long time, right? So there are multiple changes that have happened during those periods. So
Sorry, what
I
changes
want
are
to
you
know about
referring to?
any change that impacted the private equity space of India to grow, or anything that I mean, because of that the current private equity space is growing.
Okay, so there are many. I mean, if I go back many years, I think first and foremost, the opening up of economy in the early 90s was a defining moment where global investors started looking at us. It takes time for anyone to, why I'm going back to that era, because sometimes a lot of people just look at how things are happening for 10 years and then decide to enter the market. That is how they do that research. So for any private equity or venture capital industry, policy making at government level, local government level, is very important, right? How the regulations are changing, how the regulations are and policies are consistent, right? That is very important. So what we have seen in the last decade or 2 decades is that we have been very open to conduct our business in a far more transparent manner. And also our regulations are also getting tighter. So what is the private equity fund worried about? That we should get the company that we are investing in should get the opportunity to grow and expand. And as pehle license raj hota tha, but as we are getting the ease of doing business actually helps you. And as these policies are getting implemented over a period of time, private equity landscape has changed. The sector-specific policy changes helps the sector most attractive. We have seen that in BFSI, we have seen that in insurance, we have seen in many sectors. We've seen it in defense, aerospace. When most of these regulations change, it has changed with opening up of foreign direct investment. An FDI norm changing and changing unidirectionally is very important. So any investor gets worried when there's a flip-flop in policy and regulation. So whenever there is a regulation and then, but if it is reversed, it just shakes confidence of an investor. So at government and policy level, last 10, 15 years have been very consistent. The reforms at the taxation level, especially the indirect taxation, GST has really given boost to our industry, because it has now helped most of the businesses now getting corporatized. I mean, it's very slow. The organized industry has latched up to the change in GST. There were initial issues in terms of people losing profits. There were also contraction of margins, but things are getting settled. Now what we see is when you see the GST collections going up, it basically means that your unorganized sector, which was earlier not in the radar of your VAT or service tax is now also coming through GST. I mean, the GST collections are actually rising faster than the GDP growth, which means that your informal economy is getting formal. It doesn't mean that your economy is growing at that particular pace. So these policy level and regulation level changes are very, very important. Government backing the defense industry, it's really helped funds looking at this. Then PLI schemes has really helped some sectors kind of get very deep. It has helped private equity funds back businesses to create manufacturing capabilities in India. And it has happened sector after sector and of sector. So, and we've seen the success of how that industry gets deepened. Whenever a PLI scheme is launched, government has come up with more rational custom duty structures such that nobody is able to dump goods and kill the the evolving industry in our particular way. So a lot of government initiatives have been fairly consistent. China plus one, lately there's a lot of talk which will help India. I don't know to what extent we are seeing the funds flowing from China instead of China to India. It's still very slow. China, the investments which were happening in China was much larger than what it's happening in India. So any small loss at China's end will be a big gain for India, and we are all hoping that that is something that which will help the industry. But so yeah, to name a few, frankly, I mean, there are many sector-specific events which I would say really helps. So I did mention about capital markets. So IPO, your secondary markets getting deepened, your SIPs towards mutual funds and PMS, that being very consistent in India, it's created a very, very strong ecosystem in the Indian markets, which has given confidence to global investors. Because at the end of the day, we are the large part of money is going towards unlisted space or projects. And if you want your exit, you need to also have support of secondary markets, which we are seeing. So that is actually one thing which has really helped, because if you go back 10 years, even lesser than that, any global event, even if it is small in nature, it used to trigger a reallocation from emerging markets to developed markets, and that would mean that there will be high selling in Indian markets by FIIs, and that used to result into sharp market correction. The moment there's sharp market correction, investors lose confidence. But the domestic institution and HNI investors have given a very, very good balance to the market, and that is why, despite very few geopolitical issues that we are having globally, plus just triggering inflation, but our markets are very strong because we have a very strong demand in India. These are a few things which I thought I feel very relevant, which has helped the market. The VC industry has kind of widened a lot in the last 4-5 years, which has really fueled the startup culture. Again, government has played a very important role in creating that particular ecosystem. Of course, that VC industry is also going through its own cycle. So it's a time when now most of these investments which have happened need to fructify, and exits need to happen. But I think we are at that particular stage where in the next 3 to 4 years, we believe that VC industries should also be able to churn their money and start deploying and supporting new startups. But good work happened in the last 3-4 years.
Thank you so much, sir. There was actually one more good question which was asked by Vishal. Let me ask on his behalf, which was, how do you go about generating ideas in a private equity space? Obviously, it's not like in a way, every data is available in a particular way of you looking at it in a listed market. But how do you go about generating ideas in the private equity market? Or is it completely on a case-to-case basis, you keep on screening, and then eventually, if you like something, then you go about taking a look at it?
It's both, actually. So there's no data. Frankly, there's no data. So, we keep looking at businesses. So, usually our hit ratio is roughly about 1 to 2%. So we look at 100 businesses, maybe we'll end up investing in one. But the balance 99 help us to build pieces, right? So, everything that you learn in your school, whether it is Porter's 5 forces, whether your industry attractiveness index or basic financial ratios, everything comes into play when we are choosing a business. So idea is very important, right? As I said that, innovation and idea is very important. Execution is slightly more important than that. Because in India, nobody's coming with a product which is first in India. I think the only thing that I can think of is payment solutions, UPI, which I don't think is there anywhere else in India, and everyone else is trying to see how we can do it more as efficiently as India is doing. But on the product side, which is coming from private industry, it's largely innovations happen elsewhere. We are doing adoption, and we are doing adoption in a much better way, right? So when you're doing adoption, then it's largely about execution, right? So what we continuously look for is that if there are 10 things that we need to solve for, how and where we can get the maximum tick mark. So of course, we want, industry to be attractive. We want the industry to be large. But as I said, sometimes it's just an unorganized play. Furniture, again, furniture or jewelry business, or for that matter, there was a time when women wear was totally unorganized. Men wear were getting organized, men formal wear got organized, and men casual wear got organized 15, 20 years back. But women wear were not getting into the organized segment. Few players started in ethnic side. Nobody started on the formal side. But now if you look at it, it's always a segment which was not captured. It was not a new idea, but it's so difficult to execute. It's so difficult to serve a customer which is constantly looking for new offering, right? Because you have to manage, you have to blend the idea with the execution of the business. So, you need to have a product differentiation, quality differentiation. If you don't have, you need to have a brand differentiation. If you don't even have brand differentiation, then how do I seek a sustainable competitive question? Kuch to hona chahiye, which is very differentiating. Sometimes promoters are very dynamic. But if you are actually, selling soap and not, and don't even have a brand for that soap, how will you ever compete even with Life by forget about other premium brands, right? So, we look for a combination of a lot of things. But most importantly, we try to choose something which is differentiated. So I'll give you a few examples. For example, as I said, Stanley is a luxury play in furniture. When we invested, we actually believe that the HNI segment in India is there, but embedded. There are a lot of people in each and every city who have the money to buy, but they don't have the opportunity to kind of buy the right product. There were so many businessmen who were actually flying to Malaysia and China and buying for the entire house and coming back by paying some 40-50% duty. So we believe that, the story will change if we are able to execute well. So what it happens is that wherever Stanley goes and opens a store, they are the first one to actually start offering to a customer, and customer then walks in and says, hey, I actually was thinking about this, but I have the money to afford it, but no other service was there to so I was going to my local carpenter and getting it done. So it's not an idea, it's more about execution. We have Senco Gold. Senco Gold was largest West Bengal based jewelry retailer. Jewelry retailing is not something that you can say it's innovative. It's been done for years together in India, right? And from there, you want to expand nationally. Of course, nationally, you will never be able to beat anyone. But you have reached a stage where you have proved that you are a very efficient business. Your product is accepted by the market. You are able to, your brand is accepted by the market. You have a strong brand recall, and it is showing in your ROEs and ROCs. So you have to now become a national player. That is where we came in back. So as simple as a PVC pipe, right? Who thought that PVC pipe now is being considered as a consumer product? Technically, anyone will say, "Arey, to pipe hai." Who thought 10 years back or 15 years back that wires and cables will be considered to be a consumer product with brand ambassadors and others? But today it is, right? That is how your execution gets differed, because somebody like Havells was able to create a brand out of a wire and cable. And why it became a very strong consumer product is because there was a distribution architecture and you were directly selling to the customer. Either you're selling to the customer or you're selling to the influencer of the customer, which is your electrician, right? You were not selling to a company who was then going and fitting it into. So if you are selling to a developer, what developer under kya laga raha hai, nobody knew. But now, the actually developer says that if I have this brand company's wires put out over here. So how you are able to execute, how you're able to kind of change your story kind of defines you. So, I mean, I don't know how else to answer to this question, but I thought this is how businesses differentiate themselves.
So a follow-up question on this. You explained brilliantly how execution matters to you guys and how it has created brilliant brands out of nowhere. How do you go about anticipating that this is going to be something for a potential portfolio investments which you guys are thinking of? Let's say, as you mentioned, you should have a product differentiation, or you should have a brand, or at least you should have an execution. Let's say for a potential investment which you are looking at, it has neither product differentiation, neither brand. How do you go about judging whether the execution capabilities will actually be implemented in the manner which you are anticipating?
So we have private equity fund, right? So we want things to be already tested to some level, right? So
that's essential.
We don't back somebody who is like still at an idea stage or a product development stage. We don't do that, right? So we would have seen that, at least 100 crore of business we have done.
Mm-hmm.
And see, we understand how to take the company from 100 crore to 500 crores, what all will be required. Mostly from, that is where what is, founders, they don't have either the cash with them that, they can just hire somebody from who is ex-HUL, 20 years of experience, and then give him few crores of salary and ask him to build. Usually they don't do it, right? So they want to build themselves, because you do it in the frugal manner, then only you can build the business. But if the founder is doing it for the first time, then he actually doesn't know how to move from 100 crore to 500 crores. You need a partner who would play that role along with you to reach out that journey. So when we evaluate somebody at 150 crore business, what we have seen that it is a tested hypothesis. It has reached a particular stage. You need to scale from here. And that is where we come into play. So any business, for example, let's talk about product, right? If it's a commodity product, then the brand is very important. If you are not a national brand, you have to be at least a champion brand in your city, right? If you are a champion brand in city, you can think about your state or your region and then a national. But usually we don't like to actually back commodity products, because the risk is very high. And see, ultimately everything is about financial, what you are seeing on the P&L and balance sheet. So if there's profit, right? If let's assume the gross margin is good, right? Let's assume it gross margin is 40% plus. Now, if the gross margin is 40% plus, then there is something in the business which is allowing the company to generate at 40% gross margin. Our job is to look, ki boss, isme aisa kya hai that somebody is paying him that particular premium such that he's able to generate gross margin. And he's reached a scale of 100 crores. It could be a commodity, that which means either there's a differentiated product level, वो नहीं है, तो brand level पे है, नहीं है, तो he has built a different distribution architecture which is sustainable. Sometimes, you don't even know how it is getting played. So, for example, very interesting how entrepreneurs are so we were evaluating a shoe business, domestic brand, very large mass product for both men and women. They're very frugal in terms of their advertisement budget. But when we went there, they said that, the top two Bollywood stars were their brand ambassador, Shah Rukh Khan and Kareena Kapoor at that point of time. So like, you're such a small business. How are you able to afford this? And are you able to do in TV media? He said, no. We are very clear. We are not doing any. So having a brand ambassador, it's more expensive when, you have to create a space for them on the platform, media platform, whether it is television or billboards or anywhere else, right? So you don't have the budget for it. So they said, yes, we don't have the budget for it. So we use social media, which is more frugal advertisement, and plus use their photos on all our product dabbas, right? So every product box, if it is a men's shoe or men's slipper, it will have a Shah Rukh Khan image. If it's a female, it will have a Kareena Kapoor image. Every truck which leaves from my factory will have the brand ambassador's photo, because it will anyways get painted. It gets painted with that particular photo. And wherever it will go to, I also ensure that my stockist and everyone who is using it, my photos, that is my branding. My last mile has the brand ambassador. I'm using it without using the technology, right? So you can't beat a Indian founder's mindset. That is, so you suddenly realize, hey, it's a rural brand. Yeah? I mean, maybe I don't know about it, but his customer segment knows about it. So we have to sometimes do that diligence. That what is the brand feedback? So we give third-party agencies to do that work. We do a lot of inventory check. We see we have done focus group discussions with consumers and non-consumers to understand what is a brand recall, because it has to be a methodical approach. It cannot be my intuition against anything, right? So if we need to see how it is concentrated, so we work a lot in terms of the concentration risk. So if I am having 100 crore revenue, is it coming from one city, one state, from one distributor? Maybe you can have a champion distributor who is doing very well. Maybe you have a very large store which is doing very well, but all of your other stores are actually not delivering, which means that how will you ever expand? Because your new stores are not delivering. Your champion store is delivering, your champion distributor is delivering. But if you start seeing the data to be more homogeneous, more across, which means that there's more acceptance, right? So another example I really like is a company called Aditya Vision. It's a listed business, so you can go and study. It's a electronics retailer from Bihar. In Bihar, he is larger than anyone else. He's 80 or 85 stores with some 800 to 1,000 crore revenue. I am 100% sure that, Chroma board might not even in their radar for the next 5 years must be thinking about 80 stores in Bihar. Because you're a national brand, you have to first look at metros, tier 1, tier 2, and there is risk associated with the next level of investment. But there's one champion guy sitting in Bihar who has championed Bihar and cracked it and is doing it profitably. Right now, that particular business is doing so well on the listed markets because people have understood the state who nobody could crack, that person has cracked it. And now they're thinking about Eastern UP, Jharkhand, West Bengal. Their ability to the confidence that they will be able to crack those markets is now high. Now they are 1,000 crore business. So their ability to now negotiate with the brands is high. So they are able to offer the same level of discount schemes, what a Chroma offers or a Reliance offers in those markets. So, you will have those And then, because it's unlisted, we try to kind of define a pre-decided business plan. So we work a lot in terms of how next 5-7 years are going to be, which products you will enter, which segments you will enter. Everything kind of gets discussed and debated over months. And then that is agreed upon as a path. So all of this story has to kind of stitch together for us to be, there's no epiphany, frankly, it's just data.
See, your way of answering questions is mind-boggling.
Yes.
Rather than just answering point to point, but actually covering a lot of context with interesting examples. I think I'll have to watch this again.
Okay.
So,
I'll watch this again just to see that how I've done.
sir, while a lot of questions have been around, PE, I think, one of our alumni has a brilliant question on the consumer space. His name is Darshit Soti. Darshit, you there?
Yeah, sir.
Maybe you can ask the channel question.
Hi, Darshit.
Yeah. So, hello, sir. So, sir, on the FMCG brand who is in the startup phase, separating rural and urban areas. So, for example, in urban, which channel would be ideal for the brand in the growth phase, like in terms of general trade, modern trade, or e-commerce, or directly having own D2C brand? And same for urban areas. And in terms of EBITDA margins also, which channel would be beneficial at least in the growth phase for the FMCG startup brand?
Okay, it's a very, very interesting question. Okay, so there is no right answer to this, but I'll try to kind of highlight the challenges and how usually founders go about it. And there are enough and more founders who can beat the theory, right? So there will always be exceptions, but see, on the physical side, your own EBO theoretically is more value accretive because you capture your entire profit margin, which anyways, otherwise you have to pay to a distribution network. But in FMCG, nobody does a EBO business, right? So I'll ignore that for a moment. See, the distribution network, no, it is generally built over years, right? So having your own distribution network for a early growth is something that is not a low-hanging fruit. So you, again, in terms of so what you do is a typical strategy for a new business. One, you go the online route. And when I say online, you go through a third-party seller first because it's a variable cost model. You are able to empanel yourself with a third party. If your product is sold, then you pay a whatever percentage of that particular revenue to that particular third party. You have to ensure that your product is right, your pricing is right, and even after paying to that channel, you're making enough and more for yourself so that you have next level of cash flows for your growth. That is number one. Number two, you also start appointing distributors one by one in districts. And usually distributors' role is to take up their channel to reach out to the retail customer. But because you're a new brand, they don't have confidence. They have to ensure that they have to collect money from the market. So what you generally new brands start with an outright wholesale sell, which means that I will do a bulk deal with a wholesaler in that district or in that state. Wholesaler will take the item, let's assume 1,000 products for me. So there's usually you create an inventory catalog, you invite all of these distributors to your place, they look at it, they book an order, and then you supply. And you give a slightly delayed credit period, which means your working capital has to be, you need to have the money to fund this, right? If your product gets sold by the wholesaler and he's able to collect cash, then he will pay you money and then the cycle will start off the next batch of order. And usually that's how brands start. So the two aspects on the physical side, wholesalers, and on the online side, you start to resell, third-party resellers. The challenge with everything else is that it needs a lot more patience. It needs a lot more capital to reach. So, the large, the large format stores or the modern retail outfits, they actually don't leave much margin for the brands. So it's the lowest margin in the channel. So highest margin is when you're having your own BBO. Then if you're able to kind of create a distribution architecture for yourself, that's also very margin accretive, because the distributor takes care of working capital and everything, and you just deal with the distributor. But that happens when you've kind of grown to a level. You cannot do it over a period of time. So my suggestion is that, for a new entry, these are two things that you should be looking at.
So first is marketplace, and then if your brand is working, then moving towards distributor
Yeah. So
side.
first, on the distribution side, first wholesale business, right? Which is doing
Right.
bulk sale with a wholesaler, then he does his own pricing and all that. So you don't have control over that. When you become larger, then you start your distribution network, appointing your channel. See, appointing a distribution channel means you have a see-through till retailer, right? So
Right.
you need to appoint your sales team. Sales team goes to the retail outlet and generates order. Nowadays, there is all softwares, order to get generated and built on the phone. So large companies do that ways, but your question is more in terms of the new businesses. So I think this is
Right. Yeah.
one should go. See, if you're able to kind of get, 200 crores from a venture capital fund and you can burn it, then there are many ways to kind of grow fast.
Right.
But I believe that it has its own plus and minuses. It buys you, it kind of gives you a quick access, but sustaining that and sustaining it profitably is very, very important, because you can give a lot of discount and capture the market. But once the discount goes away, does the customer have the same respect and positioning for your product, right? Because if you are a mid-premium product and you're given a discount, but in customer's mind, you're a discounted product. It's not an easy path. It's not an easy path. So not everyone has been able to succeed, but I'm just giving you a guidance in terms of what one should do.
Understood, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. Sir, already we're just 4 minutes away, and we really appreciate you have given so much time on your calendar already. So last question which I wanted to ask without causing any more spillage over your calendar. So some key reading materials which you can share, any books which you feel that has helped you or can help these young budding investors, post reading.
Okay, I'm not a books guy. Okay, but yeah, I will advise. It's better to understand directly from the market, right? So it's if you are an entrepreneur, no, if you want to be an entrepreneur, and see, it's the two things. If you want to become private equity investor, you have to start with as an analyst, and I think that path is there. Finacle is providing that particular opportunity, and I think it's what Shailesh and everyone is doing is lovely. If you want to be an entrepreneur, I would advise that do the dirty work, choose your product, align yourself with a company which is in that particular segment, learn a bit, and work on your product. Your product has, it's something which the customer carries with him to his home. If you are able to get the product right, everything else follows. Everything else follows. So I'll not give suggestion in terms of, because there's one, now there is enough chat GPT kind of world will, one question and you will get like 100 answers out of it. And students these days are actually far more smarter to kind of find reading material far more smartly than just picking up a book and reading. But so that's, I would say, please listen to a lot of entrepreneurs. I think they meeting, if you get to meet, attend these conferences where entrepreneurs come and talk. Sometimes you get to kind of huddle with them and talk to them. They are very inspiring. I think I have had most of my learnings from my initial days as an investment banker, when I used to meet a founder every day and the passion that they have for their product. Sometimes the product has no meaning, but the passion that they have for their own product and company, it's remarkable. And that what differentiates from a businessman and a service class like me. So I would say that learn from the guys who are entrepreneurs, and don't learn from guys who write about it.
So I've always believed asking the right questions can get you right answers, but in today's session, I feel I asked a lot of wrong questions, but yet you gave a lot of right answers to those questions. So thank you so much for sharing. And we sincerely hope, sir, you give us another opportunity on your calendar to learn again from you. Little bit more specific topics we'll come back with the next time so that we can pick your brains around the same. And maybe we would like to learn a lot again from you, sir, if you allow.
I enjoyed thoroughly, Shailesh and everyone, for participating and inviting me to this forum. I'm honored. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir.